Another mastery topic for the end of quarter 4 is to know all of your parent graphs. Parent graphs were way back, I think, in chapter 4. So I'm just going to highlight them here. The square root parent graph was the one that started at 0, 0, because when x is 0, y is 0. And it looked like half of a laying down parabola. So that's just a normal y equals the square root of x. And then of course when you mess around with putting in an x minus h, that's going to move it to the left or, well, it'll move it to the left or right depending on what h is. And then if you add a k, depending on if k is positive or negative, it's going to move this simple graph here up or down. If you stick a negative value for a in there, it's going to open upside down. But the basic square root function looks like this. The other parent graph that we talked about was the inverse. Y equals 1 over x. That turned out to be a hyperbola. And so it was just a graph of two curved lines. And of course, if you messed around with a, h, and k, they had the same effect. A changed how far apart it was, h moved it left or right, k moved it up or down. And then we had the cubic one. That was the one that had a slight inflection. And depending on what a was, that inflection would change. It might get deeper or steeper or not as steep. And then of course h and k moved it, h moved it left and right, k moved it up and down. Then we had our exponential equation, and the black one here is the exponential equation, and that's just y equals a times b to the x, or in this case y equals b to the x when a is just 1. And of course the h moved it left and right, k moved it up and down, and a changed how steep it was. And we talked about y equals x squared and how that always looks no matter what. And so you should find in your notes something about all of those parent graphs. The only one that we added to that most recently was the logarithm. So if you had to graph y equals the log of x, we added that most recently. And that was the graph where we filled out tons and tons of, let's see if I have a graph, I'll pull this over, XY charts, but you can rewrite y equals log of x just by taking 10 to the y power and letting that equal x. And then you could do an XY chart and you could find out all the values for x and y. I would start, of course, with finding out, or of picking some y values. I always like to pick some positives and negatives. So I might go something like this, and then I would take 10 to that power to get what x is. So 10 to the negative 1 is 1/10. 10 to the 0, or anything to the 0 for that matter, is 1. 10 to the 1 is 10. 10 to the 2 is 100, and that's getting pretty big. When I plot those points, I like to start with this 1, 0. That's always the x-intercept. And then 10, 1 is going to be here. But I notice that when x is 1/10, y is negative 1 here. Oops. And so my graph, when I graph that, is going to curve around. And this is going to continue going down. It's never going to touch this y-axis, but it's going to keep creeping along it.